For 7 years, I believed I had everything. A beautiful wife, a stable home, and a future I could see so clearly. A future with children, vacations, and growing old together. Ours was the kind of marriage people admired, the kind that made others say, "You two are perfect for each other." But lately, things had changed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my perfect marriage was slipping through my fingers. It started subtly, like a whisper in the wind, little things I could have ignored if they weren't so off. Red Triangle pointed down. She started coming home late. It was gradual at first, just an hour or so, with a quick apology and a believable excuse. A last-minute meeting, she'd say. Traffic was terrible. But soon, it became a pattern, then a habit, then a routine. Red Triangle pointed down. Her phone became her lifeline. It was always with her, clutched like a secret she couldn't risk losing. She used to leave it charging in the living room overnight. Now it never left her side. Even when she showered, it went with her. I once caught a glimpse of a message notification. She snatched the phone so quickly, you'd think it was a ticking bomb. Red Triangle pointed down. Her touch grew colder. We used to have a ritual. When she came home, she'd hug me from behind, whisper something silly or sweet, and we'd laugh. Now, she barely looked at me. And when she did, her eyes no longer carried that warmth, the one that told me I was her home. I told myself I was imagining things, that work stress was making her distant, that this was just a phase. But then, one night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and found her side of the bed empty. I walked into the living room, expecting to see her curled up with a book or watching one of her crime dramas. Instead, she was sitting on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, whispering. My stomach tightened. I stood in the shadows, listening. "I can't talk right now," she said in a hushed voice. "I told you he's sleeping." I didn't breathe. "I know, baby. I miss you too." A pause. A soft giggle. Then, the words that shattered something inside me. "I wish I was with you instead." I walked back to the bedroom, my body moving on autopilot. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Had I really just heard that? I lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, willing myself to believe that maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. But deep down, I knew. I just needed proof. That's when the idea struck me. Ahí en cámara. Not to spy on her, not to prove she was lying, just to ease my mind. At least, that's what I told myself. So the next day, I ordered one. A small, discreet device that could be hidden easily. Just another object blending into the room. I installed it in our bedroom, strategically placing it where it had the best view of everything. As I set it up, my hands trembled. I almost stopped myself. Did I really want to do this? Did I really want to know? But I pressed forward, because deep inside, a voice whispered, "You already know the truth." I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The next few days were a blur. Every moment I spent around her felt like torture, like I was watching a stranger play the role of my wife. She still kissed me goodbye before work, still sent the occasional "How's your day?" text, still acted like everything was normal. But I knew it wasn't. Every time she smiled, I wondered, is she thinking of him? Every time she touched me, I questioned, is this guilt? Pity? Every time she looked at her phone, my heart pounded, knowing she was hiding something. But I had a plan. I told myself I wouldn't check the camera right away. I'd wait a few days, gather enough footage to prove I was just being paranoid. That was the lie I fed myself. On the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. She had fallen asleep beside me, her breathing slow and steady, while I lay there, wide awake, my pulse racing. Carefully, I slid out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and locked myself in my office. I plugged in the memory card and pressed play. At first, it was nothing. She'd get ready for bed, read a book, scroll on her phone. Mornings were just as mundane. Her waking up, getting dressed, leaving for work. For a moment, I felt stupid. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe this was all in my... Then I saw it. 11:47 p.m. She gets out of bed, wearing nothing but lingerie. She leaves the room. Seconds later, the bedroom door opens again, and someone else walks in. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was my best friend. He closes the door behind him. She walks up to him, smiling, and wraps her arms around his neck. He pulls her close, whispers something in her ear, and then they kiss. Not just a kiss, a slow, deep, intimate kiss. The kind of kiss that breaks a man. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I'd be sick. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. I couldn't look away. They moved to the bed I shared with her. My bed. Then, as if the betrayal wasn't enough, I heard them laughing. My best friend chuckled. He'll never find out. And my wife, laughed softly and whispered, he doesn't suspect a thing. I stopped the video. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the screen, my body frozen, my mind refusing to process what I had just seen. Rage, pain, nausea, every emotion slammed into me at once. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers. But then a new feeling took over. No, she didn't deserve my anger. She didn't deserve my heartbreak. She deserved revenge. And I was going to give it to her. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the paused video, my mind trapped between disbelief and fury. My world had just imploded. Yet outside, everything remained the same, silent still, as if the universe hadn't just set my life on fire. My wife was still asleep in the next room, curled up peacefully, while I sat here knowing the truth. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was cruel. She was laughing at me behind my back. And so was he, my so-called best friend, the man I trusted like a brother, the man who had stood beside me at my wedding, raising a glass to eternal love while secretly fucking my wife. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at me to march into that bedroom, wake her up, and end it right then and there. I wanted to see the fear in her eyes when she realized she was caught. I wanted to watch her stutter through pathetic excuses. I wanted to throw her out of our house and slam the door in her face. But I didn't. No, she deserved worse than that. They both did. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think, to plan. This wouldn't be some emotional outburst. This would be a reckoning. Red triangle pointed down step 1, secure the evidence. I copied all the footage onto multiple USB drives. One for me, one for her family, one for his fiancée, one for her boss. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to ruin them. Red triangle pointed down step 2, play the role. If she thought I was still clueless, I could use that. I would act normal, loving, completely unaware. And when the time was right, I'd pull the rug out from under her. Red triangle pointed down step 3, set the trap. I was going to orchestrate her downfall in a way she'd never see coming. A grand spectacle, the ultimate betrayal revealed in front of everyone who mattered to her. I smiled to myself. It wasn't a happy smile. It was cold, calculating. She wanted to laugh at me behind my back? She'd regret it soon enough. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, my face neutral, my heart pounding. She stood by the coffee maker, dressed in my t-shirt, humming a tune like she wasn't a lying, cheating snake. "Morning, babe," she said, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile back. "Morning. Sleep well?" She nodded, handing me a cup of coffee. "You okay? You look tired." I took a sip, swallowing the bitterness. Not just of the coffee, but of the reality I was trapped in. "Just couldn't sleep," I said. She walked up to me, wrapping her arms around my waist, pressing her body against mine. "I love you," she murmured, kissing my neck. For a second, my stomach turned, but I held my composure. I kissed her back. I pretended to love her, just as she had been pretending with me. Because in just a few days, her whole world was going to burn. The hardest part of my plan? Pretending. Every day, I woke up next to a woman who had shattered me. Every night, I kissed the lips that had whispered, "He doesn't suspect a thing." But I played my role perfectly. I smiled when she spoke. "You left a head, jokes." I told her I love you back, even though I meant none of it. And the whole time, I was setting the stage for her destruction. Step 1, gathering the pieces. While she was at work, probably texting my best friend behind my back, I got to work. Red triangle pointed down the footage. I uploaded everything to multiple USB drives, encrypting it so nothing could be deleted. Each drive was labeled and ready to be sent to the most important people in her life. Red triangle pointed down the guest list. I planned a family dinner, a special night to celebrate our love. I invited her parents, her close friends, and of course him. She had no idea she was about to star in the most humiliating night of her life. Red Triangle pointed down the special delivery. Before the dinner, her boss would receive an email. A very detailed email. One that included timestamps, videos, and undeniable proof of her extracurricular activities. Would she lose her job? Maybe. Would she lose her reputation? Definitely. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Powerless. Exposed. And her best part? She still had no idea. Step 2. The calm before the storm. The night before the dinner, we lay in bed. She curled up next to me, tracing circles on my chest. "I love that we're doing this," she said softly. "A nice dinner with family. It's been a while." I smiled, pretending I wasn't counting the hours until she'd be publicly destroyed. "Yeah," I murmured. "I think it'll be a night to remember." She laughed, kissing my cheek. "I love you." I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. Not for long, I thought. Tomorrow, she'd finally know what betrayal feels like. The night had finally arrived. Everything was set. I dressed well, sharper than usual. I wanted to look like a man in control. A man who wasn't broken. A man who was about to flip the script. She was excited. She wore a sleek black dress, the same one I had once told her was my favorite. She thought tonight was about love, about family. She had no idea it was about revenge. The guests arrived. One by one, the people she cared about most walked through the door. Red Triangle pointed down her parents. They had always adored me. They believed we had the perfect marriage. Not for long. Red Triangle pointed down her closest friends, the ones who had probably been blind to her deception. Red Triangle pointed down, and finally, him, my best friend, my wife's secret lover. He walked in casually confident, like he had nothing to hide. I shook his hand, forcing myself to ignore the nausea that burned in my stomach. He had no clue that in just a few minutes, his world would crumble too. The toast. Dinner went smoothly. Too smoothly. She was laughing, talking, touching my hand like she hadn't torn my heart apart. And then when everyone was comfortable, when she was completely at ease, I stood up and clinked my glass. The room quieted. She smiled at me. I smiled back. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. It's not often we all get to sit together like this." She reached for my hand, squeezing it. "Enjoy it while you can. And tonight is special," I continued, "because I want to celebrate my wife." Her eyes lit up. I turned to her, tilting my head slightly. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of love, loyalty, and trust. I heard him shift uncomfortably in his chair. And because of that, I continued, "I thought it was only fair that I share something with all of you. Something intimate." I pulled out the remote. Press play. The moment of truth. The TV lit up. At first, it was just static. Then, the footage appeared. The room fell silent. There she was, in our bedroom, wearing that lingerie. And then, he walked in. A gasp. A shocked sobi. Her mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Her father's face turned red with rage. And my wife, she froze. Her body stiffened. Her eyes locked on the screen, unable to look away from her own betrayal. The room was drenched in shock, in disbelief. And then came the words that had sealed her fate. "He'll never find out." The video ended. I let the silence linger, let it choke her. And then I turned to her, my cheating wife. "Surprise," I said softly. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands trembled as she turned to me, eyes pleading, begging. "Babe, I can explain." I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. "No, sweetheart, you can't." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. My wife, no, my ex-wife, sat there, her face pale, her lips trembling, her entire body frozen in shock. Her mother was the first to break. "How could you?" she whispered, staring at her daughter like she was looking at a complete stranger. Her father wasn't as soft. He slammed his fist on the table so hard that glasses rattled. "Are you fucking kidding me?" he roared. She flinched, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Dad, please. Don't. Say." A word. His voice was ice. He turned to me. Sana, he stopped himself, shaking his head, the disgust on his face clear. Meanwhile, her friends looked at her in horror. Some of them turned their gazes away, unable to meet her eyes. Others shook their heads, realization sinking in that the woman they thought they knew was a liar. But the best part? Her lover, the so-called best friend, was completely speechless. His face drained of color, his hands clenched into fists. He looked at me, then at her, then at the screen still frozen on their betrayal. And then the final nail in his coffin. His fiancée, whom I had secretly invited, stood up from her chair. She turned to him, her face twisted in a mixture of pain and fury. "You disgusting piece of shit." She ripped the engagement ring off her finger and threw it at his face. A perfect shot. It hit his cheek with a dull thud before bouncing onto the table, spinning like a cruel symbol of his failed future. "You were engaged?" My wife gasped, as if she had the right to be shocked. Her lover turned to her, his eyes wide, panicked. "Babe, I was going to tell you." The slap echoed through the room. His fiancée's hand connected with his cheek so hard, the sound was almost satisfying. "You're a fucking joke," she spat. "And I hope you both rot in hell together." And just like that, she grabbed her purse and stormed out. My revenge was complete. I reached into my pocket, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. My wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, stared at it with wide, wet eyes. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." With trembling fingers, she picked it up and tore it open. Her divorce papers, already signed, already filed. She choked on a sob. "Please, we can work this out." I stood up, adjusting my suit, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "No," I said simply. "We can't." I turned to her parents. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserve to know." Her mother wiped her tears, refusing to look at her daughter. Her father just gave me a firm nod. I looked around one last time, at the ruins of the woman who had destroyed me, at the man who thought he had won, only to lose everything. And then I walked out the door, with my head held high, with my dignity intact, and with the sweet taste of victory. The moment I stepped out of that house, I felt it: freedom, the weight of betrayal, the months of suspicion, the heartbreak, all of it melted away. I had taken back control. I had exposed the truth. I had left her in ruins, sitting in the wreckage of her own choices. And now, I was done. The fallout was brutal for her. Her parents disowned her. I later heard that her father told her, "You're not the daughter I raised," before cutting her off completely. Her boss fired her. Turns out, screwing around with a married man didn't sit well with the company's moral policies. The email I sent, paired with the footage, was more than enough to get her removed. She lost her social circle. Friends distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who had publicly humiliated herself. Hello. He didn't last. After the dinner, his fiancée left him for good. And my ex-wife? She never heard from him again. He ghosted her, left her to deal with the mess alone. She tried reaching out. She texted, called, left voicemails. All unread, all ignored. I had nothing left to say. At first, I thought I'd feel empty, like I'd won, but lost something in the process. But I didn't. I felt alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, questioning every little thing. I wasn't second-guessing my worth. I was free to start over. So I did. I focused on myself. I hit the gym harder, took up hobbies I had neglected, went out more, reconnected with old friends. And then one day, I met someone new. She was nothing like my ex-wife. She was kind, genuine, the kind of person who made me realize that love doesn't have to be a lie. I took things slow, let myself heal, let myself trust again, and now I'm happy, truly, unshakably happy. Because in the end, she lost everything. And I won.